นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. A question people ask regularly is, what did the Buddha do after he was enlightened? And I think anyone who studied the history and the Buddhist scriptures will know, well, the Buddha spent the rest of his life, about 45 years, teaching the Dhamma and spreading the Dhamma around the population of northeast India, starting a Sangha of monks, later nuns as well, teaching laity, and then we have all the suttas and the words of the Buddha that have come from those 45 years. Luckily we still have them with us today. But actually the immediate first period after the Buddha was enlightened, he didn't teach. He continued to sit under the Bodhi tree, and they say experiencing vimutti sukha, the happiness of liberation. Enjoying the fruits of his efforts. He'd been practicing for 6 years, even though for most of that time he'd been going slightly wrong. Practicing, developing the ascetic practices, but without gaining the kind of insight that he finally did under the Bodhi tree. But he had been practicing for a long time, and if you include all his previous lifetimes, then a very long time. He'd been as if searching for enlightenment, the way to free the mind from the cycle of birth and death and all the stress and suffering that a human mind can create. And he'd finally done it, so it's like, I imagine the happiest kind of happiness a human being can experience. All the suffering is gone, and you know it's gone. And cycle of birth and death is ended. As the Buddha said, the house builder will build no more houses. A complete change for the Buddha, having awakened to the truth, the Four Noble Truths he fully penetrated, and his mind completely changed. So he spent that first period just enjoying the peace of liberation, sitting under the tree. And over the next period, before he'd even thought of teaching, he contemplated also what brought him to enlightenment. So he contemplated the teaching of paticca samuppada, dependent origination or dependent co-arising, the way the human mind, under the influence of avijja, ignorance, creates karma, makes karma, is constantly doing things and creates a sense of self and leads on to this whole cycle of birth and death. He was contemplating how that works and what he had realized, what his enlightenment experience was. It's the nature of the Buddha, is very thorough and careful person, so even having become enlightened, he still went back and was reflecting on the causes and conditions that led up to that. And they say he reviewed the process of dependent arising in forward and reverse order, because in reverse order is how suffering ends, how the cycle of birth and death ends, how attachment ends, craving ends, and how ultimately ignorance, avijja, is uprooted and the mind is purified. So he became thoroughly well versed in how suffering arises for a human being, and then in how suffering can be ended, which I would say, was probably the greatest knowledge, the most important knowledge, the most important skill that a human being can develop. Nothing else compares, nothing else matters so much. And it's from that experience and fully understanding how suffering arises but then how it ceases, that the Buddha went on to teach in so many different ways, different people, presenting the Dhamma in ways that were effective and helpful so that people could understand. So that's what the Buddha does after his enlightenment. He contemplates how suffering arises, how suffering ceases. And he even thought at first that maybe there'd be no one else in the world who would understand this. But eventually he thought of his own teachers prior to being the Buddha. He did have his meditation teachers who were very skilled in the practice of jhana. He thought of them, he thought they might understand. But with his special knowledges, he realized they'd already passed away and he couldn't teach them. But then he thought of his 5 friends, the ascetics who had practiced with him before. So then he went wandering to meet them, and he began his first teaching with the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and to coin a cliched phrase, the rest is history. When I was a young monk, I had lots of questions in my mind, and when I got to know some different very able, peaceful and wise teachers, sometimes I would ask them a bit mischievously maybe in those days. But that's what you do when you're a young monk. You don't feel ashamed to ask stupid questions or direct questions because you can get away with it being a young monk, as it were. So as one time I was talking something on these lines, this thing about the Buddha becoming enlightened and how he came to start teaching. I was talking with Lungta Mahabua about this. And first of all I was asking him about the Buddha, and then I was asking him about what his opinion was on my teacher, Lumpur Cha, who by that time had passed away, when he got enlightened, which Ajahn Mahabua didn't answer because he's very careful, where I wasn't so careful in those days. And he actually scolded me and said I was asking the wrong question to the wrong person. But I understood why, and we all laughed about it. He wasn't angry, he just laughed and said I was, what did he say? He said, I'm worse than a mangy dog, because a mangy dog, when they have an itch, they know where to scratch. He said, you don't even know where to scratch, so you're worse than a mangy dog. It's the kind of teaching Ajahn Mahabua used to give, because he loved dogs, and so he'd always have a dog story ready for every occasion. So I'm worse than a mangy dog, or I was then anyway. And we thought that was the end of it, but of course I was asking with another monk, we were both plying him with questions about the Dhamma, about his own practice, about Ajahn Chah, about Lumpur Man, his teacher, and getting a lot of different answers than we expected, including the mangy dog answer. And then we thought, he's probably not going to tell us anything, so we sort of stopped asking these very direct, kind of rude questions. And when we stopped, then he did sit up and he started talking about his own enlightenment experience, which was quite amazing and unexpected. And And he said, he talked about the night of his own enlightenment. He gave us the place where he was enlightened, which is a monastery in northeast Thailand, Wat Doi Dhammachedi, what he'd been doing, how he'd been contemplating, and he was walking meditation. He was staying on a little cave, which you can still go and visit today. And if I remember rightly, it was something like 11 p.m. at night when he had his final enlightenment experience. And he went through it in great detail. And this is just monks talking to themselves, amongst themselves about meditation. So he wasn't like boasting or making show of it. He was just talking about it to inspire. And because not many years after that, he passed away. So I think he was just passing on for our benefit. So he talked about his own night of his own enlightenment. So that cued me up for that question again. So what do you do after you're enlightened? The stupid question came back. So he said, you just experience gratitude. For him, that's what he experienced. He said he spent the rest of the night bowing to the Buddha. The Buddha's not there. The Buddha passed away 2,500 years ago. But the Buddha is in your heart. And he spent the rest of the night bowing to the Buddha with tears of gratitude and appreciation, because he had followed the path of the Buddha, his teachings, the way of practice of a Buddhist monk, that kept the discipline, developed the meditation, contemplated the Four Noble Truths, and freed his mind from the causes of suffering. He'd done it, he'd completed the course, as it were. So then he was just full of gratitude. If there'd been no Buddha, no one would know this way out of suffering. And he said he just felt the gratitude overwhelm him, so he spent the rest of the night from 11 a.m. through till dawn bowing and appreciating the Buddha. He said, with tears flowing out of his eyes. So after enlightenment, if you're a Buddha, you contemplate what brings you to enlightenment, what insight you've had, what is the way that has led, and what are the causes and conditions that have led up to that. If you're a student of the Buddha, what we call a savaka, then possibly contemplating the same thing, but also with the gratitude to the Buddha, who was the first, who was self-enlightened. And with no Buddha, there wouldn't be any students. So every student of the Buddha can't but be grateful to the Buddha for having shown the way and explained his teaching so well. And we call it the Swakata Dhamma, the Dhamma that is well expounded. And as far as I can see so far, and as far as all the other monks I know say, there's all the Dhamma that you need to become enlightened is there in the words of the Buddha, in the teachings of the Buddha. It's all there. We have everything we need. Of course, the problem is not the Buddha and his teachings, the problem is us. We get distracted, just as when you were meditating just now, your mind loves to wander away, and physically you're there, but mentally your mind can be all over the place, or falling asleep, or travelling the world, or whatever. The real problem, the real obstacle is our mind. It needs to practice, needs to train. And it's whether we're willing to do that, whether we're willing to give our time and energy to the practice. That's the kind of, I would say, the foremost question in our life. Can I practice the Dhamma? How can I practice the Dhamma? What do I need to do? What more do I need to do? If you're listening to this talk, you already will have faith in the Buddha on one level, or at least an interest, and you're interested to pursue these teachings and put them into practice and learn and gain something from them. But there's more that you have to do, there's more that we all have to do. So one part of the practice, we have to keep coming back to what inspires us and what maybe first inspired us to begin learning meditation, listening to the Dhamma. People come to Dhamma at different times in their life. A few people start very young, and they have a kind of natural interest from when they're just a child, maybe. Perhaps that's their good karma from past lives. Other people come to the Dhamma later on. They spend the first part of their life doing all kinds of other things unrelated to the Dhamma. Traveling, working, earning money, making friends, forming relationships, maybe starting a family, having kids even. But at some point, the thought comes up, something or other attracts us to the Dhamma. Quite often it's some suffering, isn't it? People have suffering or stress come up in their life, so they're looking for a way to deal with it. Sometimes they make mistakes and they realize they need some more wisdom in their life because they've made mistakes and those mistakes have hurt them or hurt other people. Some people have to deal with problems, so that brings them to search for the Dhamma. And that's quite a genuine way to come to the Dhamma, isn't it? You recognize that there's been some suffering in your life, and so you're looking for a way to deal with it better and get beyond it. It doesn't have to be extreme suffering. It's not like you have to have some big crisis necessarily. Some people, like for myself, I don't think I had any big crisis in my life. When I started being interested in Buddhism and meditation, I was only 16, 17. But I did have some awareness that life doesn't always go the way you want. And then reading the Buddha's description of what is dukkha, what is suffering, not getting what you want is suffering. And I thought, oh, I know that one. Because that's quite normal. Almost on a daily basis, you won't always get what you want, will you? You want something and you haven't got it. Maybe you haven't got it yet, or maybe you'll never get it. But we all want to be successful, we all want a pain-free life and we don't get it. We all want to be successful in whatever we do and we're not always successful. We want everyone to like us and not everyone likes us. We don't want criticism and insults, but sometimes we get it. Sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not. We all want a smooth, easy life, and it's not smooth and easy, and so on and on, and the list goes. And so you don't have to have a big crisis necessarily, but you just start noticing the fact that you don't always get what you want. They say a wise person in the Buddhist sense is somebody who realizes they won't get everything they want in life. Because when you realize it, already your mind goes a bit quiet, doesn't it? This is just the truth that the Buddha already pointed out. When on some occasion you don't get what you want, rather than complaining and sitting there lost in your suffering, you might take it as a teaching and then, this is it again, isn't it? This is dukkha, not getting what I want. This is the dukkha of not getting what I want. And your mind can accept it maybe if you have that mindfulness, that insight at that moment. There's a certain acceptance and you can move on then. When we can't accept it, then we're stuck, aren't we? Stuck with why? Why does this happen? This shouldn't happen. This is not fair. This is not right. It shouldn't be like this. What did I do to deserve this? When your mind's not accepting that you're not getting what you want, then you're in trouble and the suffering continues. So a lot of our practice is about developing mindfulness and then reflecting, developing insight into this simple truth that we don't get everything we want until we understand it better. It doesn't mean to say you give up trying to do things or be successful or achieve things in life. It just means your attitude has to be modified, doesn't it? As you go through life, dealing with the normal things of a human life, aging, illness, people not liking you, not always getting the thing you want. Very ordinary things, but your attitude is changing. If you're using the Dhamma, you can start learning about that and how to keep your mind more peaceful and more aware as you encounter suffering in its different forms. As I said, a lot of suffering in life is just niggling. It's not crisis mode suffering. It could be, but a lot of it is very simple. You get older. Someone was telling me today, because I got a bad knee, they said, "Oh, yeah, knees start going downhill from the age of 30, if you notice." Well, that was a long time ago for me, and maybe for you. So that's one thing you have to get ready for if you're younger than 30. Unfortunately, when you hit 30, you're going to start, your knees are not going to be the same as they were when you're 20. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll experience lots of pain, but you may notice they're not as strong or they're not as good as when you were 20. That's just one little bit of the body, one little thing, quite independent of whether you're successful in your job or you have a great relationship and great family and this and that. You may have all those things, but at least be aware that your knees are going to go downhill from the age of 30. Sorry, that's just the limitations of a human body. We don't want it. Of course, we want to be perfectly healthy indefinitely. And you may know, today they came to the monastery to celebrate my birthday. And Buddhists, when they celebrate a birthday, they always say, "I wish you lived till 120, is a very common phrase you hear. So if your knees are already going downhill from the age of 30, that means 90 years of bad knees. That's what we're wishing someone if they're going to live till they're 120. And that's just the knees, not including other bones and eyes and ears and organs and heart and this and that. So you don't have to wait till you're 120. Probably already by the time you're 70 or 80, you're probably struggling. So when you be careful, because you wish someone to be 120, you're saying, "I wish you to have lots of pain and discomfort for many years to come." But as I've talked about before, Luang Por Supa was a monk who lived to the age of 118. So he's about the only monk I know who actually did live to almost 120. And for him, everything went falling apart from a long time before he was 118. Eyes went, ears went, back went, knees went, this went, that went. But he always seemed very happy, very peaceful. So whether your body is falling apart or other aspects of your life are falling apart, what's the important thing? Well, the important thing is actually to have a well-developed mind, to practice the Dhamma, practice mindfulness, practice insight, so that you can cope at least with the bits of your body that are falling apart and any other things that happen. And it's possible to do this because we have teachers like Luang Por Supa, who reached 118 very peacefully. There's proof of the pudding is around in the world that there are people who have learned to transcend suffering. The suffering of the body, suffering of not getting what you want in one way or another, fear, anxiety, people not liking you, things not going well, the world falling apart. It can all happen, can't it? But you don't necessarily have to suffer with it if you understand this is just the way of conditions. So back to that teaching, the dependent origination, what did the Buddha say? Well, he said, when there's avijja, not knowing, ignorance, conditioning your mind, present in your mind as it were, this creates sankharas. Some sankharas are skillful and wholesome thoughts, wholesome intentions. Some sankharas are unskillful, unskillful intentions which lead to suffering. Skillful ones can be developed to free ourselves from suffering. Unskillful ones embed us more in suffering, lead to what we don't want, but actually we do it all the time. We create sankharas that lead to suffering because of our unawareness, lack of awareness. So much of our practice is about developing the opposite of avijja, which is vicca, knowledge. But knowledge in the Buddhist sense isn't purely theoretical knowledge. It starts there, listening to the Dhamma, reading the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma. But ultimately it's the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths in your own experience, from your mind, that you know, you see from moment to moment. And that's your aim. That's when avijja can actually, you can remedy it and reduce it. Because if you're seeing the Four Noble Truths, you're seeing that sankharas, unwholesome sankharas, lead to suffering, you immediately want to drop them. When you see fire and you know fire hurts you, you don't want to touch it. You don't want to pick up hot things. You don't want to put your hand on hot things or grab hot things because it will burn you. When you know that, it's just automatic, isn't it? So we know that with the material world, pretty much everyone understands that much. But with the mental world, the mind conditioned by avijja, we don't see it. We miss it all the time. So we keep picking up fire, as it were, in our mind because we don't realize. So we have to practice developing those qualities that will help us to not do that. Stop picking up those thoughts, those emotions that will lead to more fire, more suffering in your mind. We have to pay attention. We have to learn lessons, sometimes painful lessons. And we have to develop the wisdom and understanding so that we don't make those same mistakes over and over again. But just as you can learn about fire in the effects of fire, say on your hand or on anything else, you can learn that fire is a destructive force that can hurt you. You can learn the same about states of mind conditioned by ignorance. But to do that, we have to turn our attention inwards. That's why we are cultivating mindfulness and insight, learning to reflect on things, learning to apply the Dhamma, learn the Dhamma on the inside. That's the kind of knowledge that will free us from suffering and stop us creating more suffering. So pretty much everything we get involved with, if there's still ignorance affecting our mind, is going to hurt us in one way or another. Everything, when it's under the influence of greed, anger and delusion, which come from ignorance, it's going to burn the mind. So you have to be on the alert. Like if you have a fire around, say there was a house fire or your kitchen pan goes on fire or something, you have to be alert to the danger. And the fires of the mind are exactly the same, except for this is an inner alertness. You have to have your own fire warning siren, maybe your fire alarm in your mind. So when you notice the mind going in the way of greed, anger, jealousy, fear, worry, all the different mental states that cause suffering, you have to develop that fire alarm of the mind that sort of rings in whatever way it comes up for you. Something that says, oh, careful, this may hurt, careful, this may lead to suffering, this way of thinking, this way of acting. And that comes through practice. You have to keep developing the mindfulness and looking back at what's going on and learning. Sometimes we learn from past experience. You've hurt before and you can reflect back, oh, look what I did. I got angry, I got upset, I was jealous, I was arrogant, I was conceited, whatever it was, you look back and learn. And little by little you can educate your mind to be careful. And then the fire alarm is primed and ready to help you the next time you're going that way. Sometimes we get the fire alarm from outside, other people. Sometimes they give us good teachings, feedback, and they warn us, be careful. So it could be a teacher or a friend. But you can't rely on that forever because your teachers and friends are not always present, are they? They're not always there. Or even worse, sometimes they warn us and we don't accept it because we are full of pride and conceit. So we don't like to be told what to do, even though someone says, don't follow your anger, don't follow your jealousy, don't be selfish. They can see, but we can't see. And that's the problem with avijja, ignorance. It's there and it blocks us from seeing the truth. It's like the person asked Ajahn Kalyano, he said, delusion, where is delusion? It's so hard to see. He said, you're like a person riding on a horse asking, where is the horse? It's there, underneath everything. It's going along with you all the time. Sometimes it may even just be skillful just to assume you're acting out of ignorance in a situation and just question, what am I doing here? Am I really doing something that will be for my happiness and my benefit and other people's happiness and benefit, or am I doing something that's going to lead to more suffering? Could be just a thought, the way you're thinking, question it. Check what are you thinking? What are your views and opinions on something? Are they going to lead to more suffering in one way or another? Views and opinions come from thoughts and experience and memories, and we build them up. Even good, you might say good knowledge, good opinion, good views that we've developed that may seem correct. But if you never question them, never look at it, what you're doing more closely, you never look for the ignorance in the situation, you don't realize sometimes even a good opinion can cause you suffering, can burn you, as it were, can be like fire. It's like Buddhists, sometimes they meditate a lot, which is good. And they say, meditation is important, let's practice mindfulness. And then they kind of automatically assume everyone else around them knows that as well, when they don't. And so the meditator is meditating and someone else is making a loud noise nearby, and we get angry. I'm meditating, you should be more respectful, more sensitive, you shouldn't make these loud noises because you're disturbing my meditation. Because noise is an obstacle to meditation, it's true, but so is anger. So you might have the knowledge, noise is an obstacle to attaining jhana, we should have no noise, or no one around me should be making any noise, for example. Which is kind of correct. But then in the moment, sitting there meditating and someone else is making a noise that is definitely not helpful. And so we get angry. And the noise is not so much the problem, is it? It's the anger based on a view that nobody should be making noise because I'm meditating and they should all be keeping a good environment for me to meditate. And that's just one example, isn't it? We do it all the time. People, their behavior, we look at other people's behavior and say, they don't keep the precepts maybe, or they're not as diligent as me in their meditation, or they're not helping. Maybe there's some opportunity to help out or do some dana or do some charity, and they don't do it, they don't join in, so they're not good. Even the sort of knowledge we get around Buddhism, when you cling to it tightly, can cause anger, can cause suffering. So knowledge, views, opinions, beliefs can still be a cause of suffering when we're not aware of how we're grasping at them or clinging to them. And of course, what's more common is probably our preferences, just what we like and what we don't like. So what we like, we want more of and we want to get when we want. What we don't like, we don't want, we want to get rid of. So that's constantly affecting the mind. All caused by avijja, unawareness, and often getting more compounded, getting stronger as we go through life. Often we become strongly invested in our preferences. So that's who I am, so the sense of self forms. That's me, I'm the one who likes this, I'm the one who doesn't like that. People, groups of people, material things, every aspect of life, food, whatever. We like and dislike everything. We form our opinions and then we hold on to those opinions and they start to burn us, because if we don't get what we want, we're not happy. Or we get what we want and then we're worried we're going to lose it or not be able to keep it, feel insecure. It's going on all the time because ignorance is like this kind of, it's like the horse we're riding on. It's just always there underneath and we're missing it. We don't recognize it. The only way, like Lungtao Mahabua, he said, you've got to weed out your ignorance. The only way you can do that is establish mindfulness and reflect back on your own mind all the time at every level of the practice. It doesn't matter whether you're a beginner or you've been doing it for a long time. There's certain aspects of the practice that don't really change. Establishing and maintaining mindfulness never really changes, whether you're day one of your Buddhist practice or you've been doing it your whole life and you think you're an expert. It remains the same. Establish mindfulness. Reflecting on the Dhamma never really changes. You have to reflect on the Four Noble Truths. Where is suffering? What's its cause? What do I need to abandon here? What do I need to develop here? Certain reflections never really change. What might change is your skill with them, your ability to maintain mindfulness, your ability to identify different kinds of craving and attachment coming up. Hopefully over time that improves. But the reflections stay the same. Ajahn Chah once gave a talk, you can read it, about how, even if you develop some insight in your practice and you feel you know a lot or you've had some very powerful life-changing insight, you even may have attained something. He said you always still have to approach that with some caution because it's not sure. It could be our own mind fooling us. It could be avijja again. It could be avijja saying, I've been practicing all these years, I want to experience some peace, or I want some insight, knowledge into the Four Noble Truths, I want to free my mind from suffering. And that desire means you grasp onto any little experience that seems to back it up. And you kind of don't want to reflect on it, you don't want to question it, because you've been seeking it so much. You just want to enjoy it, you want to be somebody, something in your practice. So it's not uncommon, unheard of for meditators, practitioners to think they've attained something and not to question it. But Ajahn Chah used to say, question it. It's not sure. You think you've attained Sotapanna, you're a stream enterer. Well, maybe you are, but it's not sure. Keep the questioning mind available. Keep that interest to learn and to look at experience from different angles and the question, and keep the possibility open in your mind. Otherwise you shut down to the truth, don't you? Not just with attainments like of the path, but in many things in life we tend to shut down the mind as soon as we think we know something or we've achieved something, where we say, I know that, done that, been there, done that. And we no longer want to go back and check it out or double check. We just want to accept it as a completed action or a completed task. And that can be dangerous sometimes, because then your mind goes to sleep. You're no longer questioning, you're no longer looking and observing, learning from experience. So even very experienced meditators can have that when they meditate and attain samadhi. Because samadhi is such a peaceful, powerful state of mind compared to an ordinary human state of mind. Seems something very special. So it's like, this is some real attainment, this is something really good. And then it's convenient just to slap a label on it. I've attained something here, I've attained samadhi, I've attained jhana, or I've attained one level of the path, I'm an stream enterer, or I'm an arahant. And that's it, you got it, you've attained it, no need to do anything more, easy just to sort of sit back and enjoy it. But if you've made a mistake, and then you're in trouble, aren't you? So Ajahn Chah said, okay, you've attained something, you can't deny that, you've had this good experience or a series of good experiences, samadhi, insight, good, but it's not sure. At least keep 1% open. 99% sure that I've gone beyond my suffering on one level or another. I'm keeping the precepts. I have my faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. My mind is peaceful. The hindrances are not bothering me. I know everything is impermanent, not to be attached to. Okay, but keep 1% open in the mind that maybe there's something you missed. There's something not quite there or not quite complete that you haven't done yet, just in case. Because things can change. Things can degenerate. And one of the biggest causes for losing, some kind of temporary spiritual attainment, one of the biggest causes is conceit and the view that, I've attained this. Because then you kind of take your foot off the pedal or you're careless and you stop looking and learning. So the labels we love to slap on our experience can be like that. We can grasp to them so tightly that we don't realize that they're hiding something there. Could just be sense of self, a view, self-view, some pride, some strong yearning, wish for success. We do this in the world, obviously, with the things we do in life, the work we do, sport, entertainment, everything we do, we're always wanting success. It's a very normal kind of craving, but even in meditation we'll bring it in. But we don't see where it's still hurting us, because it's blocking us off from the truth. It's avijja. So Ajahn Chah's remedy to that was, it's not sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Someone else may seem to be enlightened, maybe they are, but maybe they're not. Whether it's us or somebody else, there's always an uncertainty there. If it's someone else, you can live with people and you think maybe they're enlightened or on the way to enlighten, they're very advanced. Maybe on the outside they're very well practiced. They can meditate very well, sit for hours, their speech is very restrained, it seems to be very mindful, they never display defilements in their speech, in their behavior, they're very composed, restrained. Sometimes lay people, probably more often it's Sangha. Over the years I've met one or two monks like that where everyone is sure that they're enlightened. They seem very restrained, they can answer the questions, very wise, and it's all good and good. You're very happy for them. It's a very inspiring thing to see. But then at some point something goes wrong because they were deluding themselves. The avijja was still there. And then eventually other people realize, maybe there's a delusion. Quite often it's precepts or ethical behavior slips, and they start making mistakes or doing something wrong in their practice of the monastic discipline. If it's a monk, they start breaking rules. Sometimes when you think you're enlightened, you think the rules no longer apply to you. And so they make mistakes, and then you realize, they weren't quite what they seemed. Sometimes it's what they say in their teaching. They teach and then it starts to go a bit funny, no longer in line with what the Buddha said. So it does happen. Sometimes people on the outside seem very enlightened, very restrained, very wise, peaceful, and then something changes, something goes wrong. Sometimes it may be on the inside. Maybe you don't even know about it. It may be a private thing. Somebody thought they were enlightened and they eventually realize they're not. Either they receive a teaching from another person or they themselves realize, and maybe they remedy it internally and you never even know about it. I myself once or twice had such good meditation that I thought, this is it, I'm enlightened. But luckily I had a very good teacher in Ajahn Chah, so I also brought this reflection up. So then you go, maybe not. After a while. And if you meditate, maybe you have periods where piti and sukha comes up very strong. Your whole body is kind of light. Your mind is radiant. Nothing bothers you. You hardly need to sleep. Everything seems to be going in the right direction and you don't seem to be attached to anything. Your mind is totally kind of loosened from its previous attachments. So it's not unusual if the thought comes up, maybe this is enlightenment. But then you have to introduce the concept, it's impermanent, or maybe it's impermanent, it's not sure, let's see. To be cautious. That's a form of knowledge, that's a form of wisdom, isn't it? That can counter the avijja, the lack of wisdom, lack of awareness that might grasp on something and say, this is enlightenment. We have to be ready for that, because sometimes people think they're enlightened, it happens. And then the mistakes are made. If they're truly enlightened, well, they probably don't make those mistakes, so good for them. One less person suffering in the world. But you never know. You have to be ready. So at every level of our practice, we are working with avijja, which is difficult to see. In the early days of our practice, maybe it's obvious how our avijja comes up, causes us stress, suffering, problems. But as you practice more, maybe it becomes more subtle. We get used to hiding it from ourselves as well as other people. So you keep having to kind of go deeper and question things and investigate things more deeply. Your attachment to your body, attachment to feelings, emotions, thoughts. This seems to be the way of the Buddha, to question, to look, to learn, until one day maybe it's all gone. Avijja is completely gone. But, don't rush to that conclusion. You never know, it's not sure. So, just sharing with you some thoughts on the Dhamma practice tonight. Maybe I'll leave the talk there, and afterwards, if there's some questions, try to answer them.